Oh, chips tonight.
Now we got chips.
Hello, everybody.
That's good.
Hello.
I thought I'd share a photo of my lunch today.
Nice.
Purple
Oh,
potatoes, red potatoes, and well, white ones as well.
Are you being very patriotic?
Maybe, yes.
Do
Yeah.
they taste? Indeed,
you
do
need
they taste
more
different?
protein in the.
Oh yeah, have a bit of chicken on the side, of course, obviously.
Oh no!
Good.
But yeah, very healthy for you. Right. Okay. Welcome, everybody. We're all here today for a talk from Kathryn Robey from the Dorothy Clive Garden on seasonal changes. And today's talk has been sponsored by Cannockwood and Gentleshore Gardening Club. So thank you very much to them for that. Right. As usual, I'm going to warm you up with a few quiz questions. So, are you ready? How much does the annual membership cost at Dorothy Clive Gardens?
I've just told them how much it costs per day.
So we'll have the answers at the end. Don't shout out.
Yeah.
Second question: how do you tell the difference between English and Spanish bluebells?
Oh yeah, that's
Yeah,
easy.
it's the leaves.
Oh, that's
Easy.
No,
Easy
easy
on the one
peasy.
side.
All right. Okay. Well, now you've said that, the questions are going to get harder next week. And okay,
Easy
so
when you know.
if you take fish oil supplements, just wave at the screen.
Oh, yes.
Oh, okay, not many. Okay, right. So do people take the 1-a-day tablets?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So do you remember ages ago, old days, they used to feed you a spoonful?
Oh, cod liver
Yeah.
oil.
Oh, yes.
Oh, I used to love that.
Well, that's going back a bit. That.
I loved it. I
It's
used to
before
have
my
2 or
time,
3
obviously, so I
spoonfuls.
don't know. The question is, so
Before my time.
I mean, you probably get these little bottles, don't you? Right. Even if you get the high strength ones, and in the old days, well, I say old days, but you used to have like a spoonful of that. So in fact, I think I've got a photograph, might be better. Yeah. So the question is, those tablets on the left, they're classified usually as 1 a day. How many of those tablets would you have to have compared to a normal serving of the cod liver oil? It's not 1 for 1. I'll tell you. I'll give you that.
Probably
should one.
I don't know, but your cod liver oil's out of date.
Is it? Swiftly moving on.
I like that.
Right, but it still tastes fine. It's not killed me yet. Right, just a couple of bits to let you know. Keele University Cherry Blossom. Has anybody been to see it?
Yesterday.
Fantastic.
Yes.
If you haven't been, I went for the first time last week. They've got the National Collection of Cherries. Cherry blossom, and they are starting to come out now. They're looking really nice. I think they have a progression over the next sort of 4 weeks or so, so it'd be good to make a trip and go and see them. The website says you can get the map from the reception, but I tried it and that didn't work. They don't have them, so make sure you print off the map before you leave. So if you go to the website, you can print it off, but it is looking fantastic, so well worth doing. If anybody
Can I
likes
just say, Indy, if I just say, if you're going, the car park by the Students' Union is free at the moment. Okay.
good point.
There are things over it, so that's yes. Okay.
And don't get stuck in the Students' Union if anybody does go.
Those were the days.
The Plant Life organisation are asking people to do a cowsip survey. So if anybody's interested in that, you can head to the website, and they're asking you to sex the plants. That's nothing dodgy. They're just asking you to tell them whether it's a male or a female plant. That's all.
Do they want to know all of them? I've got about 100 to 200 of them.
I haven't read the website. You might want to check.
That could be a while.
What, in gardens or in the wild?
I don't know. I didn't check all the ins and outs, unfortunately. I didn't check the terms and conditions, but you're welcome to take a look. Has anybody had any blind daffodils this year?
Yeah.
The conventional advice is that they are congested, so you should divide them. I'm not going to disagree with that because I'm not an expert, but I'm a bit skeptical. But if that is the truth, then what you can do is mark your bulbs now, because when it comes to dividing them, you will forget where they were. So what it's worth doing is, you know, your normal labels, get yourself an alternative colour and mark where the bulbs are, and then you'll remember later on in the season when you can where they are to divide them. Just another reminder that so I've had some people say to me that they've enjoyed watching the meetings on their TV instead of on the computer screen. So just as a reminder, if there's anybody new here today, you can actually see our meetings live on your big 50-inch, 55-inch TV if you want to, instead of having to crash in front of your TV. If you need to know how to do that, ask me at the end. And you know, I quite often like to show you a useful app that you can use. Does anybody like to visit NGS Gardens?
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we'll be able to start visiting soon. This is the NGS app that you can download on your phone. So I'm just going to show you a shot of my computer, of my phone. Is that coming through? Can you see it?
Yeah.
So there's the app.
Yeah.
So you can download this on your phone and you can search from your current location or a different postcode. Then you can select dates. And I'm just selecting the next 28 days. So you click on that and then you just click the search button. It's a hell of a lot easier than flicking through a catalogue or a magazine. And basically, wherever you are in the country, will find the local gardens that are open near to where you are. So it just takes a bit of time to think about it, and there you go. And you can see right at the top is Yew Tree Cottage, which is actually in not far from us here near Stafford. And you can scroll down, and there's plenty of gardens to go and visit. So if you're ready to start visiting gardens, that's there for you. Yeah, there's quite a few there. Now I'm going to go back to Yew Tree. So if you click on it, it gives you the address, it gives you the opening times, and it gives you a description of the garden as well.
Indy.
Yep.
I'm the booklet coordinator for Staffordshire, Birmingham and the West Midlands for the National Garden Scheme.
Yep.
And that particular app is extremely good for booking, because a lot of gardeners have got to book before you can go, particularly at the moment before May the 17th. So you really need to be looking at the opening times. And the one that you picked there, Yew Tree, I know that they're open quite regularly. And they also hold the National Collection for dioramas. So it's a really, if you've not been, it's a good garden to go and see. But I think you'll find that you'll need to book beforehand.
Yep.
So how do we get the app, Indy?
So you basically
Go to the App Store.
Yep, you go to the App Store and you can download it for free. And it's valid point. You need to obviously pre-book for quite a lot of these places now. And Yew Tree, fantastic garden. Ruth Plant, who's got the national collection there, she has been on Gardeners World, I think in 2017 or 2018, if I remember correctly, for the dioramas. She's got the national collection. Fantastic garden, so well worth watching. Right, I'm going to just run a quick poll before.
Can you mute everybody, please?
Yeah, Yep. I'm going to mute everybody. Right, I'm just going to run a quick poll just to see how many of you have actually been to the Dorothy Clive Gardens. So there's going to be 3 answers. So yes, you've been. Second answer is no, but you do know about it. And then the third answer is no, you didn't even know about the gardens. So I'm going to launch that. It should come up on your screen now. So if you click one of the options and then click the submit button. Wow, brilliant, fantastic. Thank you very much. I'm going to share the results with you. So can you see that? So 69% of people have visited, which is fantastic. 17% haven't been, but they do know about it, and 14% didn't even know about it. Brilliant, but you will know about it by the end of today. Right, I'm just going to introduce Kathryn then now. Okay, so Kathryn is the creator at the Dorothy Clive Gardens, and she's been there since March 2017. Prior to that, she was at Melbourne Hall in Derbyshire. For those who don't know where Dorothy Clive is, it's in Market Drayton in Shropshire. It's a 12-acre garden, and they have about 15,000 visitors a year. And you may well have heard them on Gardener's Question Time if people listen to that. The Dorothy Clive Gardens hosted GQT back in February 2019. Can't even read my own writing. I think there was 2 programs they ran, one in February and one in March. And actually, I went to that event as well and did ask a question, so you might hear me if you download it on the BBC Sounds app. Right, so I'm going to ask you all to unmute yourselves. And then can I ask you all, please, to give Kathryn a lovely warm welcome and round of applause.
That's really kind, and I do apologise for not being up to speed on the computer, but in my defence, it is a new one, and the people who look after my computer have locked me out of my Zoom account. The last one went pop on my desk and started to smell, which was never a good sign. So this is a new one, and this doesn't seem to work very well. However, the slides are still the same, even though Indy's in control. So hopefully we'll whistle through the slides. I actually like it much better when you ask questions as we go through, otherwise it can seem a little bit lonely standing in my kitchen. So I don't know whether that's possible and whether you can actually do the hand up and we can chat as we go along. It is interesting that 69% of you have been. So whilst I will try and tell you the history of the garden as well, it's quite interesting at the moment. We're in a time of some change at the Dorothy Clive. So I'll tell you what we're planning and what we've been doing and really why we've been doing it, because we don't just do change for change's sake. Could we have the next one, Indy? Yep. It's like, I'm so important. It's next slide, please. Delusions of grandeur. That's about the same. So if we could have the next slide, please. Right. That's really kind. That's an aerial view of the garden from quite a long time ago, which sort of shows the shape of it and really the challenges of it. My job when I was taken on was to make it a year-round garden and to make it accessible for all. So the fact that it's hillside was a bit of a challenge, but that's okay. And the fact that it was all famous for its rhododendrons and azaleas about 6 weeks out of the year, that was a bigger challenge, really. It presently covers about 12 acres. It started off about 2.5 acres. It is very much on the Staffordshire, Shropshire, Cheshire border. We are owned by the Willowbridge Garden Trust, which was set up 60 years ago, 62 years now to be fair. And it says that we have 25,000 visitors per annum. In fact, the challenge for 2020 was that I was supposed to make it 30,000, but clearly that was a bit of a problem, really. But we did actually get there in 2019. We made 30,000. So we are trying to build it and make it more secure, really, into the future. If we could press on, Indy, with the next one. The talk itself is sort of a January to February. Sadly, the tea room lawn looked like that last Saturday. And we did have to close up and go home because it was desperate. It was sort of very snowy. But what makes it, if we could go back to the snowy one, Indy.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
That slightly demonstrates in its snowy state that although it looks a little bit exposed, and on good days we can see Snowdon from the garden, although it looks quite cold and dire at times, just across to the right from that photograph is a peach which has been flowering for a couple of weeks now. It's on the tea room wall and it is now still flowering. So even though on Saturday we were full of snow and wind and horribleness, the frost seems to roll down because we're on a hillside. So it's not actually a frost trap at all, and we can have some very rare and wonderful things. So that that is an occasional view, but we don't suffer too much from the frost, which is sort of quite interesting when you go for a walk around and wonder how these things survive. That's the view from the bottom of the old drive, and it was quite a challenge in 2017, and then, to be fair, into the spring of 2018. And at the time I had a little Golf that used to go up the drive and then roll all the way back again and looked like sitting in the middle of the A51, which was challenging, I have to say. That's a view of the old drive that is now quite historical because we've done a huge amount of work there. That was the subject of 2 winters' work, and we'll be able to see later on how it's changed and how it's evolved. But it has been a snowy area. If we could move on. Again, you can see where some of the hedges are, which, to be fair, do filter the wind, and the hedges are important. We are a charity, and we've just had a hedge donated to us by the Woodland Trust, which is going to go in up at the top end of the garden. It'll be a native hedge, and it's native edibles, really. So we do try to keep the hedges as wind filters and wind sort of to make the garden more accessible, but also so that we can grow more interesting things. We would rather put in a hedge than a fence, it has to be said. That sort of shows how we've used the borrowed treescape. We have lost a monkey puzzle tree, which you can see in the middle of the garden, and it shows how these things evolve over time. To be fair, whilst I'm not wild about monkey puzzle trees, it did stand well within the garden, but it was in quite a wet spot and started to rot and had to go. And I think you enjoy things while they're there, but if they're not bringing joy, they have to go, basically. And that was looking quite poorly. If we could move on a little bit. For those of you who know the garden well, you'll know that that's where Colonel Clive and Dorothy Clive used to live. And when Colonel Clive decided that's where the small lawn is that Dorothy used to walk around with her dog. And then when she was diagnosed with Parkinson's, they advised that the best thing for her was exercise. And she used to walk monotonously around a very small lawn with a very small dog. And then the story has it that the dog would go no more. So Colonel Clive decided that he could improve the quarry, which is to the back, and make it a much more interesting trip for Dorothy, bless her. And that sort of explains why we've got so many little paths, so much sort of jiggery-pokery and choices to be made about which way to go each day, because he was trying to make it much more interesting for Dorothy. And sadly, she did only last 3 years after that. Once he'd started the garden, he and Mr. Moore set to and started the garden and made quite a big path on the way. But his passion in the world were rhododendrons and azaleas, so that's what he planted for Dorothy. And then eventually he sold that house. He went off to Switzerland after Dorothy had died and was involved with the inks for the pottery industry. And when he came back, he sold the house and he built the 2 Colt bungalows that are now the office and the tea rooms. And he and Mr. Moore moved into one each. Mr. Moore and Mrs. Moore looked after Colonel Clive, and that was sold off with the land that runs down to the road in front of it. And over time, this area became the gravel garden, which was, well, Marcus Chilton-Jones, who was there before I was, decided that it was quite messy and quite out of character, which, to be fair, I would agree with, because I like a nice journey around the garden, and that was a bit of a hiccup. So he made it into the winter garden, which I think is very beautiful, and it keeps us going for visitors from December to March, really, and it's actually quite beautiful at the moment still. We've just got some Edgeworthias that are about to burst into flower, which is really exciting because it's only their second year. Lots of Daphnes. The birch that you can see in the foreground there are actually much bigger now. But a stroke of genius from Marcus, to be fair. To make it into a year-round garden, the winter garden has been a real plus. So if we could move on, Indy. Wonderful. They're the Cornus and Salix. We've got Cornus Kesselringii, Cornus Midwinter Fire, various different Salix that are in there.
Sorry, Kathryn, I'm sorry, I'm interrupting. Oh, there we are. Sorry, the slide hadn't come through. I'm not sure if it's my screen that's playing up. Could be me.
I think it's all to do with the speed of the broadband sometimes, but
yeah.
I'm out of my depth here.
I'll mute myself again.
That's fine. We've just cut those back. They were cut back in March, so that we keep them stool down and we keep them quite low to the ground so that we have that display every year. They used to be taller, but we find that they're better stooled. The limes that are in there, they've been cut back quite hard last summer. And at the moment we have February gold daffodils that are just hanging on. We've had Tulipa tarda. Just the Daphnes have been amazing, but Daphne Jacqueline Postel is one of my all-time favourites, which is, that's what I like. There's lots of viburnums in there. And again, we're planting a hedge along the right-hand side of that photograph because the wind whistles across from Snowdon. And it causes a few problems, it has to be said. And then we have the laburnum arch going up to the right, which takes us through later on in the season. I think we've still got some more winter garden snaps. Yep, some of my favourites, I have to say, the little iris. And the year that this one was, I actually took this on my phone, so it's not the world's best photograph. But just before I took this photograph, they were flowering and looking stunningly beautiful. Then it snowed on them and I thought, well, how sad, but never mind, at least I've taken the photograph. And then the snow melted and they were still just as perfect. So really made of tough stuff, although they look so delicate. The snowdrops and the iris are just remarkable. You do have to admire them, and look quite beautiful in front of the birch.
And do you wash those trunks on the birch?
Well, no.
Oh, right.
Actually, we don't. No, but there is another birch further up on Magnolia Walk, which I think needs a wash, and a Prunus amber that also needs a wash. But when I worked at Melbourne Hall, if Lady Rafe was cross with the gardeners, she used to tell us to wash the birch. So no, we don't wash that birch because to me it's a punishment for being bad. Enough of my trouble.
I'm interrupting again. So Indy might regret giving me this ability. We have our first question, Kathryn, from Jenny. Jenny has asked, her Edgeworthia hasn't flowered for the 2 years since she's had it, and any idea why? From Jenny, please.
It could be a bit cold where it is. They are quite tender. We put the Edgeworthias in a more delicate sort of sheltered spot. So whether she could plant something around it that would shelter it and stop the wind. It has, I think, been quite a cold winter. So whether that's frosted off the flower buds, ours are about to come into flower now, or whether it could be moved to a more sheltered spot.
Well, thank you. We'll see if Jenny, if that's helped Jenny, hopefully. But if not, I'm sure she'll ask another question. Thank you.
That's lovely. Yep.
Wrong way.
Right, thank you. There are crocuses, yep, looking pretty stunning in the winter garden. I have to say, we did put a lot of crocuses in that the squirrels dug up. So the winter of 2018, we put in a lot more crocuses. And we gave them a spoonful of chili powder on top of each one. We do have the chili festival in September. So we have contacts in the chili world, but because the squirrels had eaten all the ones in previous years, we put a spoonful of chili powder on the top of each one, and touch wood, they have come up. And there are various ones on the hillside and about. I'm not sure whether we'll have to put chili powder on them every year, but clearly squirrels don't like chili powder. So yes, we have lots of bulbs coming up this year. It's just because of the chili powder. So if we could, next one.
Wow.
Yeah, that's my favourite. That's the Daphne Jacqueline Postil, which you can smell, well, for miles around, I feel, really. I was pulling the ivy out around the stag, and people kept stopping me to ask what the fabulous scent was, which was the Daphne over in the winter garden, which sort of shows how far it travels. And it must have been in flower for 2 months, I think, this year, because it didn't get too wet. No, it copes with the cold, but just a very beautiful shrub. They don't last a very long time, maybe 20 years, but I would put them into every garden in the world. I think everybody should have one.
And Kathryn, do they require acidic conditions? Because I've heard lots of experts talk about this, and some say alkaline, some say acidic, so it gets very confusing.
It does, absolutely. I would go slightly neutral, I have to say. It lives in my garden, which is pretty neutral. It lived in a garden in Derbyshire that I did that was quite neutral. It thrived in Melbourne, in a desperately dry part of the garden, probably the only dry part of the garden. And they don't really like Dorothy.
Right.
And Dorothy is acid.
Right.
So I would go neutral. But I don't think you can guarantee that they will like where they live, which is very sad. But equally, they only cost about £15. So I would risk it and look after it.
Great.
So. Oh, there are little Scilla Mitoshenkoa, which have been a bit of a showstopper this year. Well, they are most years, to be fair. We have lots of them around the garden. They're up in February, looking stunning and bringing great joy to the world, I think, really. Look really good with the betula. I can't speak highly enough of them. The winter garden's been a joy with those flowering away, and the snowdrops behind. We have, I think there's Sam Arnott behind, which are slightly centred and much taller. And they were probably about the second set of snowdrops to flower. The Elwesii tend to be the first. Just been a boon. And then after the Scilla, we'll have lots of hostas coming up there, just to take that part of the garden through, because we don't want the winter garden to be dead through the summer. It has to have some interest, but we have to give most of the space to winter flowering things. So all coming on nicely, really, for our year-round interest. Again, there are little chrysanthemums in there, mostly snowdrops. We do have some iris in there, and that would be the Rubus thibotanus, which is a lot more well-behaved than the Rubus, well, all the other Rubus, really, it has to be said. The thibotanus we can keep under control without being too brutal to it, and obviously looks lovely in the winter with its silver stems. So yes, that's sort of all part of how the winter garden is, really. Next one, Indy.
Yep.
Super. There are our betulas, which are beginning to mature. They're the ones that were on the first slide. And that's pretty much how it's been this winter. It's been quite stunning. They are planted so that the sun shines onto them. With white stem things, you should have the sun shining onto them, and with the red stemmed or the paperbark maples or whatever, we would have the sun shining behind them for most of the day, so that you see the red from behind. It's just maturing beautifully. It's a credit to Marcus that it was planted up that way. Oh. And there are lots of little hellebores in there, which have mostly self-set. Some of them were thinned out and moved about, but they do seem to resent being moved. They go into a bit of a sulk for a while, whereas if you let them self-seed, they will take over. They really don't seem to enjoy being moved at all, really. We do cut the leaves off before they flower, so that the old leaves are gone and tatty, and then we let the new leaves come through again. And you can see there that the beds are covered in last year's leaves, basically. We use those as a mulch. We would clear them from the paths and leave them on the beds just to try and mulch the area. Basically because we can't really afford to mulch the whole garden. So this year we've mulched all of the hillside quite deeply. Next year we're looking to mulch the hillside a little bit, but we will put something onto the magnolia walk. Probably more like a leaf mould up there than the sort of mulch that we put on the hillside. So we just tend to sort of move around the garden, but throughout the hills, the quarry and the winter garden, it will be leaves on the borders. And then we were absolutely thrilled that in 2018, the Daily Mail did vote us one of the top 10 winter gardens in Britain, which, when you think that it was only planted in 2014-15, was a great treat to us. And given that I don't actually even like the Daily Mail, I was thrilled. It was one of those sort of, oh, well, okay, I'll buy it this week. So yes, it was a bit of good news. We were thrilled, so I do talk about it quite a lot. Yes, this has been stunningly beautiful the last few weeks. Daffodil Walk, which when you saw the photograph at the beginning of the triangle shape of the garden, this follows the path, the fence up to the right hand side if you're standing on the A51. And there are lots of larch, lots of silver birch, trees that we've maybe thinned out over time, really, to make it more interesting. We've put in a few sorbus, which again are not wild about living at Dorothy, but we think they might like the drier areas a bit. So there are quite a few nice trees up there, it has to be said, but it was stayed, really. So it starts the year off with lots of snowdrops. The Elwesii flower first, and then the Flora plena, and then the Sam Arnott come through. And then as they're dying back, we have the narcissus coming through, which are mostly Jack Snipe. And it says 30,000, but in actual fact, I would think there are a lot more than that at the moment. And it was interesting about Indy's bit about blind daffodils, because this year, the bigger clumps we are planning to split up. So we will, as far as possible, deadhead, but obviously there are quite a few. We'll leave them to die down a bit, to bulk up the bulbs and die down a bit, and then we will split them and move them about so that it covers a bigger area, really. But at the moment, we don't have many blind daffodils, and one of the reasons for that sometimes is shade. So you would think going up through the trees they would be shady, but they do all seem to flower again. But maybe that's just Jack Snipe, because they are more of a woodland daffodil. And then after the daffodils, we have lots of bluebells flowering, which are very pretty up at the top. And we do have a very nice gentleman who phoned me to say, I think your bluebells are reducing and it's going the wrong way. And I thought he was going to complain, but instead he asked if I would accept £1,000 to put some more bluebells in and to sort of renovate the area.
Wow.
But he wanted to remain anonymous. So I think we need to raise a glass every time we go up and see the bluebells to this anonymous donor who has been in recently and said that he loves what we've done, and we've put a new path through there, and what are the plans, and he's given us another £1,000 donation to sort out the path up there, and then to do whatever else in that area we would like to do. And that sort of sums up how Dorothy is, really. We are a charity, and we do have very kind and generous donations. And to be fair, I think it shows in the garden. It is the spirit of the garden, really. And the fact that he wanted to be anonymous, absolutely personal decision, but you know, I say thank you to him. And I know a lot of other people must be grateful when you see the bluebells.
Kathryn, what was the reason for the decline in the bluebells?
They were too dry, really. Yeah, they needed mulching. And we also had a lot of ash trees up there, which I would have to say were declining, but they still sheltered them too much and took too much moisture. So the ash trees, to be fair, we are thinning out as they decline. But the bluebells we're trying to pump up and look after. And then after the bluebells, we've planted, or we've sown a whole lot of wildflowers up there in various different mixes. So we've got sort of meadow mix and a shady mix, a sunny mix, which we think will take us through July and August until we get back around to the autumn colour again. So we think, touch wood, that Daffodil Walk has got its year-round interest, really, which is lovely. And it has been very beautiful the last few weeks. It's quite difficult because depending on the weather, it can be 3 or 4 weeks apart when the daffodils are flowering. And one year they were really late, and then it went from a very, very cold spring into a very warm summer, and burnt the daffodils off within a week, which when you've got 40,000 jacksnipe, we didn't want. But it is very much weather dependent. But they've been fabulous, so we're thrilled. Could we do the next one, Indy? Oh, there we are, more photographs of our snowdrops up Daffodil Walk. And that's pretty much how it's been the last few weeks. And you can see where they're forming clumps, and we're going to move them sideways. So we would take out every other clump or half of every other clump just to gradually thin them out and keep them flowering. So if we could move on, Indy, thank you. Oh, we did put in a lot of Primula veris up there, which I love. And they just look beautiful amongst the daffodils. They're beside the paths. And because we have the weddings up at the top and various things in the Belvedere, it's quite an important walk within the garden. We did, before we put the wildflowers down, the wildflower seed, we did put lots of yellow rattle down, which is why the grass was a bit thinner here and there. This is looking beautiful at the moment. This is one of Chris Saunders' trees. I think he actually propagated this many years ago. And it's a Prunus exyedoensis subame, apparently one of 6 in the country or whatever. And we do struggle with children climbing it because they are they are just drawn towards it as an umbrella tree, and it is very easy to climb. And in one way you want them to be at one with nature, in another way you'd like them to be at one with somebody else's nature. It's sort of but a very, very beautiful tree.
Is there a reason why there's only a handful? Are they very tricky to look after or propagate?
Well, to be fair, I think they take up a lot of space.
Yeah.
So you need the space to put them in. I don't know if they're difficult to propagate, but Chris Saunders is very talented, to be fair. And the Prunus exyedoensis would be quite upright, so it must have been top worked for the subame. You know, anything like that, to be fair, can be on a 25-year life limit. when the graft gives up. But ours is obviously a bit older and has thrived. We didn't used to see very much of it because of the old hedgerow that was in, but now there are lots more people who appreciate it. So very beautiful tree. The late spring bulbs. This is where these chaps are volunteers, to be fair, and we love our volunteers. They are so kind to us and give us time and effort, it has to be said, and we just couldn't do without them. Zdenek would go around and position the plants or the bulbs, and then the volunteers would put them in. And we tend to cost out the value of the volunteers in terms of the hours that they do for us. So rather than the number of volunteers or whatever, it's however many hours they have logged. And last year, although it was a short year and the volunteers didn't come for a while, we reckon they were worth about £69,000 to us, wow. Which is just incredible when you think that we'd have to make that a sheer profit. So we have volunteers in the garden, in the office, in the tea rooms, in the gift room, and we just can't do without them, basically. That they are our lifeblood. We have, however, reduced some of the bulbs that we plant because we used to spend about £1,000 a year on tulip bulbs, which didn't seem sustainable because we do dig them up and give them away rather than worry about tulip wilt or a pathetic display or whatever. So we've now replaced this bit of the garden with herbaceous planting and shrubs and roses, really. And then we do still do the pots that are around the tea room, and we have tulips around the tea room. But we're trying to more invest the money in the long term. And we think that environmentally that will be better. But any of the bulbs that are in each year for the pot displays, we do just give away once they're finished flowering. So they're on the tea room lawn if you want to help yourself. This year it's mostly yellow empress in the pots, and then we've got I think Recreado as well in the borders. Last year we had, no, the year before last, we had Princess Irene and Recreado together, which was stunning. But then in 2020, the Princess Irene didn't do well at all, which is a big loss for us, really.
Was it not worth, was it not something to consider to go for the more species, like more perennial tulips, so you didn't have to buy them each year?
Well, we have done that in places. And to be fair, I used to do that at Culland Hall where I lived. And to keep them coming up, you have to plant them deeper and feed them when they're finished. Well, I used to deadhead them and then feed them with bloodfish and bone meal, and they did come back. But you are, when they were so intense as they were at Dorothy, you are in danger of tulip wilt, okay. And you are in danger of losing the lot, really. And they were beautiful, to be fair, stunningly beautiful. And what does really well at Dorothy are the alliums. And they are left in all year and they self-seed all around the garden. But the tulips were just too much of a risk, really. So, and the forget-me-nots, to be fair, are very beautiful, but they die in a very inconsiderate sort of way and start to look black and miserable. So to have them in the main borders left us with a big gap. So we don't tend to put those in so much now. We've put heucheras in, which obviously will keep going. So we're just trying to make it a more perennial garden than a one-off display. It is the fruit of their labours, you have to say, bless them. Those are the Princess Irene and the Recreado. And you can see it's a big area, that to leave them to die back was just a bit difficult for people who were coming in the bit in the middle, really. By the time we'd emptied it out, it was an empty border for quite a few weeks, and we don't have that problem anymore. I'm very aware of people's entry fee, and I think it's got to look beautiful for as much of the year as we can, really. Bless it. I love this photograph of the waterfall, mostly. That was in 2010, and it's just grown so much since then. It's quite incredible. But what I am slightly mentally scarred about is that there's a piece of bamboo sticking up in the middle right-hand side of the photograph, and I have just spent days digging out bamboo from that bank. When I say days, it was more than a week. And it just spread and took over the bank, and I cannot believe that somebody planted the bamboo. But there isn't even a stag on that. You can't see the stag, and in fact some of the aces that are there are just so big now that it's all met in the middle at the top of the waterfall. And the aces are so happy, the Japanese aces, planted in a pocket within the rock face. It just mirrors their natural habitat, and it shows that you really do need the right plant in the right place. So the aces are particularly happy. And then it morphs into its summer glory. The azaleas on the right are the Azalea ponticum, which are so scented and beautiful, and because they're in a bowl, it holds the scent just fabulously. We do need to slightly rejuvenate some of those. That'll be next autumn's job. Some of them have grown a bit forward and a bit etiolated, so they'll be cut back, and then we'll extend the planting from bottom right around the whole of that bank. We've got Camasias, iris, hostas that we will spread around to make the bank more of the same, basically. And then eventually we will prune the bank on the left.
Kathryn, do you find the ponticum is invasive? Because a lot of people say they get rid of it. I think Marcus actually was saying when we had the RHS Bridgewater talk that they pulled all those out. They had to rip it all out. So do you just maintain the portion you've got, or what do you do?
That would be the rhododendron ponticum, the purple flowered. And this is more of an azalea ponticum, which is yellow flowered and very, very scented.
Right.
So no, we would just prune that, to be fair. Yeah. But the rhododendron ponticum we would take out, right, because we did at one point have the Phytophthora ramorum, which has been a big problem at Chatsworth and lots of places, and that has to go. Basically, it does invade, and it does hold the Phytophthora.
Yeah.
So that would go.
And do you have any of the other sort of scented ones, like King Loderi, I think it's called, is it?
We do, yes. The Loderis are beautiful. King George V, absolutely stunning, and big flowers. We do have quite a few of those, yes.
Oh wow! And when do they come out?
They tend to be a bit later, the more sort of delicate numbers. I would say that they are June.
June, right?
Really, yes, but very beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love the Loderis.
Yeah, I've got Fragrantissimum.
Fabulous.
And that came out into flower this morning, and the scent was just incredible.
Fabulous. We do have two of those that we keep in the glasshouse over winter, and they were given to us. They were a present again, but just stunningly beautiful. But grow so fast, quite amazing. But yes, lovely. And that's one of the best views of the quarry, I think. Just that's sort of where Colonel Clive's ashes are, and Dorothy Clive's ashes, and they look down over all of the colour, really, and that was his passion in the world. So he must be pleased, I feel. And in fact, I had one of my finest moments on social media when I did a 180-degree video first thing in the morning, and you could hear the bird song, see all the colour. And it got lots of hits and whatever. So that was my finest moment on social media. There are not many. And basically, we were known for the 6 weeks when the roadies and the quarry was beautiful. So that was sort of the last week of April, all of May, and the first week of June. And then people would say, "Oh dear, we've missed the garden," which is why when I took on the job, they said they wanted it to be a year-round garden, and that was my remit. So we've tried very hard to bring the rest of the garden up to the standard of the quarry, so that it doesn't matter when you come, there will be something stunningly beautiful, up to the standard of the quarry altogether, really. And as it says, 40% of the annual visits were during that 6-week period, which wasn't enough to keep the tea room going, basically. But now we do have more visitors, and they are more evenly spread with the membership scheme and one thing and another. We are hopefully there for the long term.
That 40% figure, is that just for last year's, or is that kind of regular? That's how
That's historic. That's
historic.
not now. Yeah.
Right. Ah.
Yeah, yes, that's how it was in years gone by, which obviously isn't wonderful for any business, is it, really?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we're really into our birds at Dorothy. And this was the woodpeckers who were in the tree near to the waterfall that has a woodpecker carved at the bottom. And they did fledge a whole, I think, in fact, 2 years. They fledged a brood of little baby woodpeckers, and they feed them for 2 weeks and then they abandon them. But we did have a million photographs of them feeding their babies. We've now had quite a lot more bird boxes put up. We've got a very beautiful barn owl box that's gone up, and hopefully over this winter we'll install a camera into it, so that when it is full of babies, we'll be able to project that down onto a screen in the outdoor classroom. And I do have gold crests in the shrub that's just outside my office window, so that was really exciting. But we do have a bird event coming up, and we do try to be very environmentally friendly and bird conscious. We do have peregrine falcons as well. So it's quite exciting when we have all these sightings going on in the garden. It's all part of our remit to be environmentally friendly. That was the lady with the chainsaw carving the woodpecker. Bless her, she's a demon. And she did do the owls for us as well that are dotted around the garden. We've got another ash tree that will have to come down. So we've got to decide what will go onto that one. But it's all part of the children's educational trail, because our remit as a charity is education and enjoyment. Another thing that we're planning to do, hopefully touch wood, is an observation beehive. And we'll put up a whole building that will be devoted to educational bits about bees, and it will have the observational hive in it. And then we'll have 3 other hives nearby, and we'll be able to do a whole educational session on bees as well. That's one of our other chainsaw carvings, up by the Bluebell garden. Unfortunately, the chap who is very keen on the bluebell bit liked our owl carving. That's Artemis, who is the goddess of hunting. We had a competition for the children to name the owl, and she came out as Artemis, bless her. And it's trying to instill some passion into children, basically, for the garden and what have you, horticulture. I think at the moment we're doing well. The average age of our visitors has reduced. That's Artemis during the Halloween celebrations, which is all part of adding to our range of events. But we do really enjoy our Halloween celebration. We tend to combine it with an end of season party and dress the garden up by candlelight. It's the only time we have naked flames in the garden, because living in a wooden building, it's a bit difficult. If we could move on, Indy. That's all the Burnham Arch, which is quite famous and quite beautiful, I think, really. It's another big plus in the garden. As part of our recycling and refurbishment, this is an upcycle polytunnel underneath. Which when you know about it, you can see it immediately, but for those that don't know. But we have lots of donations, lots of upcycling and lots of recycling, and this is just part of it. It's come together over about 10 years now, being tied in, and is is stunning, and we have all sorts of stories that come back about it. When we did the Heritage Lottery Fund, where they paid for us to have boards around the garden, interpretation boards telling the story, we had lots of people coming in saying, I had my first kiss under the laburnum arch, or he proposed under the laburnum arch. It's clearly all happening under the laburnum arch for about 3 weeks in the summer. But lovely, and it's lovely that people come back there for these reasons. So it is quite special within the garden, and people will ring and say, I want to book a coach trip. When will the laburnum arch be flowering? But it could be anywhere within the month, really. It's quite difficult to pin it down. But when it does, it is extremely special. So that's it in the winter. And that's it. It's super glory in the summer, with lots of alliums, which are just very happy in the dry soil, absolutely thriving. And the bit that you see at the back doesn't actually look like that anymore, but we had a very rotten thorn tree that had to come down. So we did take it down. It was supposed to have a Rosa Banksia up it, but in fact that wasn't going to survive because the tree was on its way down. And it was quite difficult to decide what to do with it, because it's morphing from the more formal bit of the garden into the woodland bit. So it's got quite a few skimmier Kew green. It's got a beautiful seat up there. And it is now a very good viewpoint of Colonel Clive's house and Snowdon and the laburnum arch and the winter garden. So hopefully even though the thorn tree died and we don't have a Rosa Banksia, we've made the most of it, really. It's just an important spot in the garden. Those are Lanicera balls that were there. And to keep them in a good shape, they need trimming every 3 weeks, which is noble, I feel. This is how the old drive used to look. This has been a winter project spread over 2 winters. And quite a huge project, it has to be said. The style of it before was cottage garden, which was absolutely beautiful when it was right, but it had lots of couch grass in it, it had bindweed in it, all sorts of nasties, and really the stronger, more thuggish plants had overtaken the more delicate numbers, and the whole border had just grown rather than be contained. So we had to do something slightly drastic with it. My remit was to make it wheelchair friendly, which, to be fair, I think is totally impossible. And we do call it Cardiac Hill. So, to push a wheelchair up there is beyond the remit, I think, really, or go down, really. So we took a decision that we would narrow it. And the tree that you can see on the left-hand side is a Cedrus deodora, which, to be fair, you couldn't particularly appreciate from where it was. We've now liberated it. I don't know if it's on the next slide, Indy. We did take most of those plants out. We did split them, overwinter them, and then a lot of them we've put back in again. But we did narrow the borders on both sides so that we can be in control of it. So it is a smart and tidy garden. We tend to have it in more pastel colours in the spring, and then it morphs into very strong Dixter-esque sort of colours in late summer. You can actually see, sorry. You can actually.
Sorry, I interrupted you mid-sentence. Sorry, Kathryn.
No, I'm fine.
You mentioned a moment ago about the couch grass and the bindweed, and
yes.
Alan has asked, how did you get rid of it? What is your secret?
Oh, well, this is a bit of a guilty secret, really. We did spray it with glyphosate. We emptied the borders, and as it came up, we would spread it out and spray it with glyphosate, because there was no other way to do it, basically. And we do try to be very environmentally friendly. We will never be organic, because there aren't enough of us and we need the help, really. So as a guilty secret, it's out, yes. We did just have to glyphosate it.
Thank you. And
I'm
by,
sure
by the way, sorry, whilst I've interrupted you, I was just going to say, Jenny said thank you for the information on the Edgeworthia.
Oh, that's kind. So that was it, July 2020. And in fact, as it's grown there, you can't actually see, but we did put a yew hedge all the way down what there is the left-hand side. And then in the winter of 2020, we put a yew hedge all the way down the right-hand side. And that will be kept to about 5 foot, seeing as I'm in old money, about 5 foot tall, and will shelter both sides of the border from the wind, basically. And it will also give it a degree of formality. It's given the garden more of a spine. Before, we had the remnants of an old hedge that ran down to the left-hand side, which all had to go, basically. But it has opened up the garden, and really space is as important as planting in a lot of ways, in the whole design of it. And a lot of people now use the garden. It did, in effect, increase the garden by about 4 acres, I think, in terms of what people would look at and use. So for us, it's been a very important structural change. And we're thrilled with it. And to be fair, I do worry. You know, I sort of came in and chopped these things down and pulled these things out and morphed the garden. But nobody has said yet that they don't like it. So touch wood. If it looks right and it looks at peace with itself, I think you've made the right decision. And I think you have a list of the old drive planting, because there are some beautiful things in there, like the Ansonia tabernata, which are a very beautiful pale blue. There are some very interesting plants up and down there. I think there's a few more views of it, Indy, that we've added. This is as it morphs into its sort of Dixter-esque flowers, and we now have on the 5-year plan that we will have it resurfaced as well. So we're going to be so smart. It will all come together in the final analysis. There are quite a lot of asters and grasses in there, which sort of take us through all the way to September, October time. And the verbena love living at Dorothy. So it's been a big success, I feel. It's a pleasure to walk up and down. I'm getting a message from Valerie Wilson.
Oh, you've seen that before me.
Okay. So, the highly scented Daphne is Jacqueline Postil, which is Postill, and is stunningly beautiful. I think it's worth a risk, personally.
It's a very sort of upright growing habit, isn't it? There's also the lower growing ones, the more shrubby Daphne or marginata. They're much more common, I think, in garden centres and nurseries. The Jacqueline Postil is extremely difficult to get hold of, isn't it? Very difficult.
Right. Well, I know Burncoos do them, and we'll mail order them, and Bluebell nurseries. And I think it's worth going on a list and waiting for, really.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Yep, well, that's it. That's what I've been saying. Reinforced with hundreds of spring bulbs. We have put hundreds and hundreds in last winter. And lots of grasses. Sedanic's got lots of grasses coming up at the moment in the glass house. And hopefully, I actually love a nice sharp hedge. So hopefully there'll be buttressed entrances to each side. An element of formality, but it's still got all the cottage garden planting in front of it, because it doesn't want to be too formal and sharp, really, at Dorothy. There are lots of curves going on. That's more of the late summer colour. And that's that's the sun terrace with the tropical planting. A lot of that is put out in June and we'll go back in again in November time or whatever. And that's our sort of riotous Dixter party time border. Lots of salvias, the Salvia goronitica, and we've got the Salvia involucrata, which I just think is stunningly beautiful in a very bright pink. The border that you can see behind it with the Agapanthus and the pampas grass is our arid border. And basically, because we are supposed to be educational as well, and we run various workshops and what have you, it was a messy border, so we emptied it out and planted it up with things that we thought would cope with totally arid conditions. Made a policy that we will never ever water it, and it's a success. It's a beautiful looking garden, but from when we'd planted it, it never stopped raining. We had that desperately wet winter. And you sort of worry about these things, that they're going to just drown. But in fact, it coped with a very wet winter, and we still haven't watered it. And it's still looking pretty. So yeah, it just makes me smile that our arid border was perfect timing just before the onslaught.
And the Agapanthus are looking pretty good as well. So, because a lot of people obviously say you have to have them in pots to constrict them, but they're clearly doing absolutely fine for you there, aren't they?
To be fair, they do very well in the ground. Yeah, it depends what they are, and the evergreen ones are more tender. The ones that do actually lose their leaves, which some of them are maybe slightly smaller, but they are much more hardy in the ground. We've got some Agapanthus Queen Mother that are on the top border, and we had 3 in and 2 disappeared. They're evergreen, and 1 was hanging by a thread, you'd have to say. Yeah. So it just varies. I find that the ones that die back are much tougher. This is our arid border. That's a beautiful Aringium at the front. And we've got various Aringium, Agavifolium, the Echiums are in there, Echinops are in there, lots of grasses. But I think you do have a plant list for the arid border. It's in our sort of low maintenance educational bit. Lots of the Verbena bonariensis again, that just love the dryness of our sandy soil. And the Agapanthus are at the front of this.
So if anybody didn't get the plant list beforehand, it is available to download from the Tender Shoots Drive if anybody wants to download it afterwards, and you can catch all the plant names on there.
Super. There are the Agapanthus looking stunning, and the Naughtia Macedonica, they do very well in a dry border. Absolutely beautiful and flower for such a long time. And then you can cut them back and they may well come again. So a very useful plant when you're open to the public for such a long time. We need things, we need the rare and wonderfuls and the special sort of showstoppers, but we also need things that will carry something else on, like the salvias, or like the Naughtia Macedonica, which just very much earn their keep. It's about the right plant in the right place, I think, and then it will bring joy and be low maintenance. Otherwise, you're forever trying to prop it up and keep it going, really, which we just don't have the manpower for. I love the winter colour that's in the autumn colour. We've got various liquid ambers, which are stunningly beautiful, although one doesn't look well at the moment. Quite a few Liriodendrons, which go that beautiful butter yellow, and the Japanese aces, which are just stunningly beautiful. The Sorbus, to be fair, I'm not so keen on living at Dorothy. So we're trying them in a drier spot. I was up at Doik in Edinburgh, and there's a chap up there who knew everything there was to know about every Sorbus. Absolutely humbling. And he suggested that they need to live in a little dry sort of capsule, really. So we're trying them and we'll see what will happen. The species roses do very well, although things like, not the mulligani either, the one with the big Moyesii geranium, They need to be damp to retain their hips. So if we have a damp summer, we'll have beautiful hips, and if we don't, it could be a bit iffy. But we can build it beautifully around the liquid ambers and the liriodendrons, really, which I think are on the next photograph. As you look across the paddocks, yes, that's a liquid amber in the front and a liriodendron at the back there. And it's just, the paddocks are stunningly beautiful, and you see them much better now that we've taken out the remnants of the hedge. So the whole idea is that that part of the garden will be full of autumn colour. We've put in sort of various smaller shrubs, and then it's just fireworks basically. And some of the aces that are around the waterfall that are red from September until December. Just fabulous. That's the one. That's the acer at the top of the waterfall, and it's, you know, it just keeps going. It just, the acer that keeps giving, really. It's coming to leaf now, and it is that beautiful deep red until December, Christmas time. The trees down the right are the sycamores, and sadly we have lost one of those. It had to go because it had root rot. But I think that's just part of the garden, and it is how it morphs over time. So we will replace that with something once we're sure that the ground is clean. Just more of the changes that you've got to go through, I feel, really. That's a liquid amber in the front. Sadly, that's lost 2 limbs now. And we're not just quite sure what's wrong with it, but beautiful autumn colour at the moment, shall we say. It may not be there by autumn. That's a Parotia persica vanessa to the left. And Parotias, I think, are well worth any garden because they have 4 seasons of interest. They've finished flowering now, but the leaves are coming through. Then we have the most fabulous autumn coloured leaves, and then the bark is beautiful. So for anybody with a big enough garden, although Vanessa, to be fair, is quite upright, but for a big enough garden, a Parotia is a beautiful tree, I think. And that's more of our autumn colour, but they are the nerines. And that tree is beautifully planted. It's a real statement tree, and the nerines in September, October, November really help. Another place we've got the nerines is just down below the glass house, and they're the Bodenii, the pink ones, which we put in with Tullibagia. And there are some Crinum powellii in there. And not many people ever actually see them, but they are so beautiful that we started to plant a similar planting scheme up outside the tea rooms because we think they look beautiful. So that's where they will next appear. This was long before I came, although I had visited many years ago. Margaret was the assistant curator up there, and she had decided that there really ought to be a rose border in the garden. So she drew it all up. She was a technical drawing person, drew it all up, and from what I can tell, and this is only what I've sort of gleaned, they did decide if she wanted to do it, she had to dig it, because the only photographs I've seen have got Margaret with a spade and nobody else. So I think she drew it, she planned it, she dug it, she planted it. And it's one of the most beautiful bits of the garden. We are trying to extend this so that it's a double border from the glass house up to the tea rooms, and we will mirror Margaret's rose garden on the other side. But that was it. It was horrible ground, to be fair, and it is up a hillside amongst trees, so she was up against it. So if we see the next one, that's Margaret with spade, with garden looking smart. And then the next one after that is the garden looking beautiful. So a total testament to Margaret's planning and vision. Looking stunningly English, I think. and hopefully that will be mirrored on the other side of the lawn. And it sort of, it takes it in a Jekyll-esque sort of way. We go from the pale border through the rose border and then into the darkest bit of the top border. Just as Gertrude said we should, really. So very beautiful, and you know, we have no plans to change that, which I think is a testament to Margaret's planning, really. We have split it and moved it to the other side, but the body of it will stay the same. There's some of the roses that are in there. That I think that's Princess Anne. And in fact, we had echiums growing in there that had self-set themselves, which shows sort of how frost-free we can be. Lots of delphiniums. It's just a very English rose shrub-baceous sort of border. We did have a Rosa Zephyrin on that structure at the back, but they are very prone to mildew, and in fact it just never thrived, so we've had to replace that. We do have some beautiful clematis on there as well, but you know, some things work and some things don't, and the Zephyrin didn't, so it had to go.
And do you do the most common question, black spots? Do you do anything about that, or do you just leave it as it is? And
we don't spray for black spot, but we do rake up all the leaves, so we do try to be environmentally friendly. It would be very seldom that we'd spray fungicides, really. But we do get all the leaves up and clean them away.
You don't use any plant invigorators or anything like that?
Well, I'm quite keen to feed. I am definitely a feeder. And we do put down the horn and bone meal. I would put down bloodfish and bone meal, and Zdenek would put down the horn, hoof and horn. So we come to alternate years. It's sort of, so yes, I am a feeder, and I think if you feed things, you keep them healthy, they can fight better. So I'm definitely a feeder. I'm quite in favour of it, and it's all been mulched as well, so keeping it healthy. This was the edible woodland garden. This is based on a chap who lived in Shropshire, who had an allotment, and he had an acre of woodland basically, and a very disabled brother who he looked after. So he decided he would feed them both off he would grow his own food, but couldn't really keep up with the allotment because they were all sort of such tender rows and straight and weedy and what have you. So he just decided to use the 3-story system and fed them out of the woodland. And he managed to grow stuff the whole 12 months of the year. And some of it, to be fair, is a little bit abstract. And because we use this for the children's education, and there were things that you had to boil for 3 hours or you'd die, we have had to slightly change the planting in there. So it's still an edible woodland, but it's maybe not quite as pure as it was first envisaged to be. This is more sort of almost allotment, will grow in shade. It's to get children into edibles, really. So we put in raspberries and strawberries. We have a vine in there which is struggling slightly with lack of sun. We have raspberries and blackcurrants, gooseberries, and rose hips that you can eat, and the Angelica that you can eat. So it's to get the children interested, but we felt that they had to have something that they could cling to a little more. So we've actually brought this into part of the tea room with the children's area, and it's there for educational purposes. We do have the outdoor classroom up at the top. So it's sort of slightly changing, and it's not as pure to its roots as it was, but equally I think they can relate to it a little more easily.
So which parts of the Angelica are edible? Because I gave away about 100 plants earlier this year. So
all right.
If
I think it's the stalk. Yeah.
Is it?
Yes. And you would use it with cakes and trifles in the old days, Indy.
Right, okay.
I'm showing my age now. Angelica and a cherry on the trifle. This is our apiary in the orchard with the evening primrose at the side there, which is a pollination belt for the bees, and heritage apples. We are hoping to move the bees into near to the top car park if we get the funding for our new building and the exhibition hive. But this is all part of our pollination sort of birds, bees and butterflies, which is what the wall down in front of the glass house is as well. We did have a little, in fact we do have now a different automatic mowing machine that lives in a little wooden house at the end, and it basically became a bit of a pet's corner for the children because they loved it when this little mower came out and used to zip round and then he'd go back in again. So it was as near as we got to a pet's corner. But yes, that's our apiary, and Zdenek is very into his bees. He's a honey man. This was the beginning of the glass house. Basically, there was a big decision to be made about where to put it once Marcus had actually got funding for it, and he was fortunate enough to get £100,000 from Manchester Botanic Society, who were closing down. And the glass house itself, as part of our upcycle and recycle, came from Holland as a second-hand glass house. Apparently every few years the government replaced the glass houses on some sort of scheme. So we were able to get a recycled glass house. But obviously, being a hillside garden, it needed a lot of digging out, and you can see the machinery and the amount of digging out that was necessary. I think on the next one it shows you the height that they had to go down.
Oops. Sorry.
Yes, that's the wall up to the orchard. And that's now planted up for birds, bees and butterflies in 3 layers, like birds at the top, then the bees and then the butterflies. But equally, there's a huge amount of digging out there. So the soil itself was down to nearly bedrock and very compacted. So not ideal to start planting into. But it was the only place to put the glass house. So if we moved on again a bit further. That's our wood pile, and you can see how elevated the glass house is. It was all part of the digging out. And the little building at the bottom left is where we keep our gasification boiler, which is environmentally friendly to the extreme. We only burn wood off the site. We don't pay any gas or electric or whatever. And it can raise the inside of the glass house by 10 degrees. So if it's freezing outside, it will stay at 10 degrees inside. So whilst we can never grow tropical stuff in there, we can grow Mediterranean, South African type plants that won't take freezing, but we can maintain some sort of temperature. I think that's it for that one. That was it going up and coming along. Apparently Marcus didn't realise, or nobody realised, that there were going to be 2 stanchions in the middle until it was actually put up, and that was sort of a bit disappointing because the planting plans had to be changed. You can see where the ground has had to be built up, and the disabled access to it was a difficult feature that they had to overcome. But on the next one, I think you can see where the paths had to go and the inside of it. Oh, that was the ground. That's it, having been well compacted. We do try, although we haven't done it this winter, to dig over another bed each year because it takes so much organic stuff to go in with it. It's actually nearly bedrock, which is why when you go around the glass house, we've got quite a lot of pots in there that are standing on gravel. It makes the watering more difficult, but it was just impossible to plant into. So we do have this project where we will dig over a bed every winter just to try and improve it and bring it together. The door that you can see that's open top right is the bit into Zdenek's propagation area. Probably his favourite bit of the garden. And at the moment, it's just full of all sorts of exciting stuff that will go into the garden in summer. And then, well, it goes from there. We have a hotbed in there into the exhibition area at the other end, and then it will gradually come out into the garden. But that's the working end of the glass house. If we move on, that's where there were two big stanchions, and Marcus came up with the idea of a Staffordshire knot for the path, which, you know, as you go around the glass house, you can see the colour scheme, which is a colour wheel with the Staffordshire knot in the middle of it. You can see the door into Zdeněk's hotbed and the little exhibition area, which this year we're going to fill with houseplants, and it'll be an exhibition of various houseplants and conservatory plants, which we think will be of interest to people. Last year it was a melon hot box, and we always have chilies in there because Zdeněk does the chilies. And the year before it was tomatoes. We had a tomato temple in there of various different sorts of tomatoes. And we're working up to actually having an orchid area. That's when we know we've arrived. That will be our orchid exhibition area, because it's a bit smaller. We can keep it warmer. We can keep the humidity up in there. And whilst we can't have Phalaenopsis orchids, there are lots of others that we'll be able to put in. So it's just trying to keep changing it and keep it interesting, and so that people can take ideas away from it. So that will be this summer. It'll be houseplants and conservatory plants.
And Kathryn, the plants that you require to fill these kinds of spaces, do you have to procure them and pay for them yourselves, or do you link up with other gardens across the country to sort of share plants?
We do share plants, but we do have to put them in quarantine, obviously. So that's sort of quite dangerous in some ways. We grow quite a lot from seeds and cuttings, and we do buy plants in. But people are very generous in giving us plants, but there is always that danger that, you know, we might have more than we bargained for, really. Just in terms of bugs, we do try to use IPM within the glasshouse, which is the integrated pest management. And we have the good guys to eat the bad guys, basically, rather than spraying with chemicals. We do feed quite a lot. And Daniel, who is our apprentice chap, is now in charge of feeding once a week. So we'll feed all of the plants. And the IPM, in fact, we costed out the first summer, and it cost £600 to look after for the summer, and to keep buying the different bugs that we needed, because they're on sort of a 2 or 4 week schedule that they will live for, and we have to put some more in. But compared to the chemicals and the bad points of the chemicals, we think it's absolutely worthwhile. So we have quite a lot of interpretation up about the IPM as well. It's just good to spread the word, I feel, really. So a lot of the plants were given. Some of the plants we've propagated and some are bought. So, and the IPM is really important to us. It is actually much more full than that now. Those are abutions at the front, and a lot of them came from John Ravenscroft. Quite a lot of the plants. When he moved house he's one of our trustees, used to own Bridgemere. And when he moved house from Hodnett back towards Bridgemere, we had lots of things from his conservatory, which was very exciting. And Zdeněk and I went down to choose what we'd like. It's like Christmas time. And then we had a van deliver them. So that was really exciting. At the moment, we've got some quite big echiums coming up in that corner. They'll be pretty good when they flower. Yes, that's our Datura, Brugmansia. And this sort of makes me smile, because we put a sign on it saying that it's poisonous and that you really shouldn't eat it or touch it. In fact, it's a cannabinoid, and it will just make you quite woozy and strange. And apparently Victorian ladies had them in the conservatory. And when they had their afternoon tea and their tea afternoons, they would sit with their cup of tea underneath for the flowers to drip on, and would have very fun afternoon tea. So I was told. So whilst it's not quite poisonous, I think it's not good for you either, really. I think Zdenek put that one in for me to talk about. More of the abutions. This is how it's, I love it when it's luscious and full. And this is how it's going at the moment. Some of them we have cut down to thicken up, but it's just beautiful when it's going. And that's the result of so much feeding, really. More of the fuchsias, they came from John Ravenscroft. John would like us to label it as a Mediterranean garden, but not all of it is. And this cherry pie that's at the front is quite famous at the moment for being very poisonous to dogs. So you have to be quite careful of that. And we have to be very careful not to have the poisonous things near to the front or the skin irritants. It's sort of, so you can design how you want it to be and then have to move it all the other way, really. But that's just part of being open to the public. And at the moment, we can't open the glass house because of COVID. So people are walking around the outsides and peering in. This was, when I first came, this was the first project that we attacked, really. It's the one that's near to the top car park on the way to the tea rooms. And basically, it was part of the old drive. It was at the very top of the old drive, but it was full of achillea and thugs that were taking over all the rare and wonderfuls and weeds. And it was just not smart enough to be in the position it was in. So we decided to clear it, and we found the steps that are up through the middle there. And it was Zdenek's first project as head gardener that he had to design what it would be, and his brief was basically that it should look smart for the position that it was in, and it should be good for wedding photographs, and it shouldn't clash with the bridesmaid dresses. So it's got to look good all year round, but be neither pink nor yellow, which is quite limiting, really. So again, we use this as part of our educational remit, and we did a few workshops which included measuring up with sort of chain measuring and developing the design. So I think the next one might be a mood board, if Indy's there to move it on. Oh, no, wrong way. Fabulous. That was sort of, this is all part of the workshop that we did, that, you know, to get more sort of mileage out of it, really. And we had a new gardener in who needed help. So, you know, Zdenek was sort of demonstrating his design skills. So they were the colour schemes that we went with, and to be all year round. Some of my favourites are the Erimuris in the bottom there. We also wanted a pergola to give it a bit more sum and substance as it went down the steps, which I think is on the next slide. Oh, there we are. That's it, when it's morphed and grown and been made more beautiful. And it has been a huge success. It is a very beautiful border all year round, to be fair. And a lot of people thought we were barking mad when we ordered the wood, and it was so big and chunky, and put it up and it looked like a gallows. But it isn't. It is now very beautiful. We've got City of York roses going up each of the uprights, which are quite soft. A beautiful ivory colour, but they're soft enough to tie in and to wrap around. So they will meet across the middle. Various bits of Nepeta in there. We've got foxgloves, Erimuris. The other roses are Desdemona from David Austin, which are a beautiful ivory colour. And it's basically lilacs, blues, silvers and ivory. Not so much a white, although we do have Crombay cordifolia in there. Just a very, very beautiful border, I think. A real a real tribute to Zdeněk's skills. And last year we put Cobius, we've got clematis going up, alternate uprights, but we put Cobius gandens in as well, the white one, which flowers sort of August, September time and was very beautiful. So we try to put in different things each year. We've got this year Zdeněk's growing some azarenes that will go in, and then people can come and ask or talk or whatever. No, it's all part of.
Sorry, Kathryn, it's on your plant list as well, isn't it? The wedding border.
It is, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, again, that sort of, because it's more recent, it's more accurate.
Yeah.
So just a very, very beautiful border. Can we move on, Indy? Oh, another view. That's it from the top. And just lovely for photographs. That little geranium at the front is geranium blue cloud, which is absolutely beautiful. It's one of the most beautiful geraniums I've ever seen. And a lot of people come to ask what it is. We are getting much better at our labelling. We've got 2 volunteers at the moment who are going around labelling things for us, because a lot of people did tend to ask why it's not very well labelled. But if I'm honest, people do take the labels home with them, which is a bit difficult, really. I think it'd be easier just to take a photograph, but they take the whole label. And sometimes they take a cutting as well. So I suppose they're set up, aren't they, really? So next one. That's more of the same border. That's the Rosa Desdemona right at the front there. And the City of York that's going up the upright. And again, more alliums, but that's because they're just so happy. And hostas that go down through the middle. It is just a lovely mix, really. The Desdemonas have been very happy and healthy there. They're the Iris sibirica. I think that's Flight of the Butterflies. And the Agapanthus leaves that you can see behind the iris. They will flower for a very long time. They're also down the old drive. And to be fair, spread quite quickly, so they'll need to be kept under control. But they do flower quite late on and quite beautifully.
And when you say you keep them under control, what do you do? Because they do spread, don't they, from the roots if you leave any behind?
Yes, well, we want to keep them there, but we will just thin them out. So we just dig them up and, you know, the volunteers take them home with them. We just give them away, really. If we can pot some up and grow them on, we will do that to sell on plant sales. But yes, we just keep on top of them in terms of dig them out and make space.
And you mentioned volunteers there. You know, while you've got the opportunity with other people on the Zoom meeting, do you require any more volunteers, or are you full?
No, we're not full. We had a volunteer drive about 3 weeks ago, maybe. We always welcome volunteers, and to be fair, we do have jobs for everybody. You know, we do have a lot of students that come, and we do have people who come for all sorts of different reasons. We have people who come with their carers, and they, you know, they do beetle away and mingle, and they're happy and jolly. You know, people come for a lot of different reasons, basically. And we do have 1,000,001 jobs that need doing. Some people will come for 2 hours and weed a border for us and go home again. But equally, if enough of them come, we've got a day's work from somebody, haven't we, really? Other people will come for the day, and they will want some tuition or some company or whatever. And Zdeněk will try and fit each in. And what we do tend to do is all the Zoom presentations and the workshops that we do, the volunteers can do those for free. And when we do the series of lectures, we will keep so many places back for the volunteers to have, rather than pay to come. So, you know, we very much respect our volunteers. And we respect the time that they're giving to us. So whatever amount of time it is, we will find something meaningful for them to do that is of benefit to the garden, that also fits in with their needs. So yes, we always like volunteers. We do ask them not to come on a Thursday, so that we have one day without. But No, they're the backbone of the garden. It's what the whole place is built on, really. So, yep. Come on down. At the moment, they do have to bring their own tools because of COVID. And they have to bring a picnic because they're not really supposed to go in the gardener's bothy. But apart from that, absolutely wonderful. That's Veronicastrum pink in the middle there. There it is, looking very beautiful. That's particularly happy in that border and stands upright. Whereas sometimes it flops, but in that border it's very happy. So, any questions about the border? Oh, that was just the most beautiful combination. The Nepeta with the iris was, well, just amazing. It should have been on the front of a magazine, or every magazine. I think that's Dark Lady, maybe, with the Nepeta Walker's Low, and the combination was just perfect.
I think it was very clever of Zdenek, Kathryn, to guess what the bridesmaids and dresses might be, the colours.
It wasn't easy. It wasn't easy at all, but you know, it would go with whatever, wouldn't it, really?
It would, absolutely. It's excellent, yeah.
So the photographs, I think, will be a success. And we've got somebody in a few weeks' time who's having a wedding, and they want the top hat marquee type thing just at the bottom of that border. So that'll be lovely. This was part of the wildflower project. We've done some right up the side of the garden, and this is the roadside grass verge for the plant life. People were having a big drive on sort of not mowing and not trimming, and so we decided we'd make it into a wildflower area. So we did trim it all off and give it a good rake, clean it all out, and then we sowed a lot of yellow rattle seed, which has to go in September, because it's got to be sown fresh. It's got to be that year's seed and go in, and then that will be parasitic on the grass roots. So we'll weaken the grass and leave spaces for the wildflowers to come through. So it's quite, sorry, it's quite a long-term project, and I think to be fair, while people think wildflower areas are easy to do, but they are a lot of work to prepare it and to weaken the grass and to deplete the soil before you can actually sow the wildflower seeds. But hopefully the yellow rattle's done its job. We have put the wildflower seeds down, and we'll have to wait and see how it looks this summer. But that was the cunning plan. We cut a lot of the berberis down that had outgrown their space, so they're much smaller. So hopefully it will be a good advert for the front of Dorothy, and pull them in off the A51. It also meets all of our sort of pollinator type remit. That was going up by the daffodil walk. We did actually rotivate the top of the soil there because it was so compacted before we put the yellow rattle down and the wildflower seed. But that was much more poor soil, so that was actually a much easier area to do. And they are shade tolerant wildflowers. You can actually get wildflowers for every situation, obviously. So we were very careful about the mix. That was a pond path that we renovated last year, and the area that you can see to the left there was full of bamboo, so we had to dig all of that out, and that's now got I think 11 yew trees in, which we will grow into cones and keep them sort of fairly topiarized, and then there are lots of grasses to go around it, and we'll also put in some verbena, possibly some crocosmia, because in the wild they would grow in South Africa on an open area amongst the grasses, and it will be a sort of grass meadow, slight formality added by the yew, and we'll match the shrubs that are on the other side of the path. So that's sort of the cunning plan for that area. And we just tend to attack different areas at different times, really. And our plant sales area, can't do without the plant sales. And it's actually, because it was empty last year, it's actually really sad. But we now are restocked and ready to go. And it was a real comeback day when we were coming through COVID and then able to open and have plant sales and what have you. It was quite significant in our day that we should now be open. So we're thrilled that we can have plant sales again. And yep, the tea room with their very famous scones, absolutely wonderful. I have to mention the tea room because I do my lunch every day. But the scones are just wonderful. I know which side my bread's buttered. That's one of our plant hunters fairs. This year it wasn't at Easter because of COVID, but it has been moved back to May 21st and 22nd, I think. This year it's a Friday and Saturday, but at least we're able to have it. And then the August one is planned to go ahead as normal. So we're thrilled that we can actually fit it in, and hopefully we'll do it. We've had to limit the tickets again, but you know, it's all just in the hands of Boris, really. But we're planning to do it late May. That's some of our special events that we've had through the years, our weddings, our play that was wonderful with the New Vic Theatre, the Chili Festival, and we did do Gardener's Question Time, which was quite exciting. So we keep the website updated, and we keep trying to do different things, both to raise money, to run workshops and spread the educational word, and just for fun sometimes, just because we can. So I think we're getting to the end of it. Thank you it's been an epic, I think. And I'm so sorry that the technology was iffy. It's a new laptop and it's not quite bedded in, would be my polite version.
No problem. we got there in the end, so thank you very much for that.
Thank you,
right,
Indy.
then. So that's the last slide, is it? I can stop that.
It is, yes. Yeah.
Fantastic. Brilliant. Thank you very much, Kathryn. That was really, really exciting to see the whole of the Dorothy Clive through all the seasons. So if anybody's got any questions, you can use your raise your virtual hand function or ask in the chat box, and then I can put them to Kathryn. Kathryn, the 40% figure that you were talking about earlier,
Yes.
you said you've changed that because that was an old figure. So what's the figure like now then?
Well, I don't have any significant figures for last year, really. We run on a 5-year rolling average, basically, and we were at 25,000, we're now on 30,000. And it is much better spread. December used to be quiet and January was dire, but now we're sort of coming round to be much better. So I don't have the percentages, but we have both increased the number and increased the spread.
Great. Is there any questions at all from anybody? And is there
on mine it says there are 11 chats.
Yeah, I think we're okay for questions. We haven't got many questions.
Super.
Well, you may as well answer the quiz question for us then. Can anybody?
Oh my God.
Yes. So I will give the other answer that in a moment, but the first question was about the Dorothy Clive Gardens. And so does anybody know how much the annual membership is? I will allow you to unmute yourselves if you want to.
£33.
£33. Good guess. Any other guesses? No other guesses? I think you may as well reveal the answer then, Kathryn.
It's £18 per person for 12 months.
Wow.
Western bit.
Very good. A bargain.
It's basically the price of 2 visits.
Yeah.
So yes, we think it's a bargain, but that helps us with winters.
Yeah, because I remember when I first joined, because the price was a lot more previously, and then Kathryn made the decision to drop the price, which made a huge difference, didn't it, to memberships? And I think it's fantastic because you know, £17, you just don't expect that much for an annual membership fee for a garden, you know, that kind of quality. So you can pop by any time, because it is, when you've got memberships for various different gardens, Trentham Gardens, Dorothy Clive, an RHS membership, a National Trust, it all adds up, doesn't it? So it does get quite expensive. So it makes a huge difference.
That's really good.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Well, we find that people are sort of surprised it's so low, which is a worry, but equally they keep coming back then, you know, and we can make it in the tea rooms, and I don't like it when the gardens are empty. It's been quite difficult over lockdown, except that we were open all through the winter. Yeah. Just for anybody.
Yeah. And I guess that, because obviously the tea room is probably quite a big part of the margin, isn't it, for the gardens? And with those,
absolutely.
Yeah.
So yes, we need the support, really.
Brilliant. Okay, I don't think we've got any more questions coming through. So what I'll do is ask everybody to unmute themselves. And then can I ask everybody please to give Kathryn a lovely round of applause and say thank you.
Yeah, that's really good.
It's fantastic, Kathryn. Really appreciate that.
Super. Thank you. Brilliant.
Excellent.
Thank you very much. Hope to see you in the gardens.
Yes, hopefully we'll be there soon.
I'm sure you will.
That's a Dorothy Clive.
Right then, folks, I'll just give you the dates of the next meeting. Excuse me, I'll have a cough. So the next date is the 27th of April, and that's a talk from Philip Obery on successful fruit growing, and that one's been sponsored by Snitterfield Garden Club. And then the following day, we have got a reps meeting for representatives from each of the clubs on Wednesday at 7:30. So if people want to join that, please let me know. There's our email address if you need it, if you want to get on the email list to be notified of when the videos are uploaded and of the cloud drive. So I will give the quiz answers out now, and then I will say goodbye as soon as I've done that. So Kathryn very kindly gave us the answer to the first one. So the second question, how do you tell the difference between English and Spanish bluebells? Does anybody know?
Yeah, they're all on one side.
The Spanish bluebells are more upright.
Tilt
I
over.
think English
Yeah,
ones
it's
bend over.
The English ones just flower on one side.
One side.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to start picking harder questions, aren't I? So there's a picture of a Spanish one on the left and an English one on the right. So the English ones droop quite a lot, and the flowers hang from one side, whereas the Spanish one, it's much more upright. And then in the middle of that, you have got a hybrid one. And there's another picture which shows you again the actual flowers drooping to one side, and the Spanish ones upright. And just one other photo on those. The other way to tell a difference before the flowers arrive, you can see the foliage. The leaves on the native English one are very thin, very strappy, and on the Spanish one you can see the 50p piece. It's very, very thick. Right, and then the last question was, how many tablets would you have to have of the one a day, equivalent to your normal teaspoon serving? Any guesses?
3.
2.
3.
5.
5.
No idea.
Right, okay, so even though that one in the middle says high strength, it's still nowhere near. And the one on the left has only got 83 milligrams of EPA and DHA, which are the little the main things you need. The one in the middle, the ones they call high strength, can have anything to between 100 and 200 milligrams. The cod liver oil, the teaspoon one, it's got 2,500. So your one a day tablets really is nonsense, because you would need for the one in the middle, you'd probably need almost 10 tablets of that a day. and then on the one on the left, I think it was 27 tablets you'd need.
Oh, good Lord.
So although they've made life easy for us by putting them into a tablet form, what they haven't really been honest with you is to say that you'd need to eat probably 10 or 20 of the tablets to make up for it.
Profit higher on the tablet.
So you are still better off having the fish oils. Right. Well done, folks. Has anybody got any questions before I open up the breakout rooms?
I was just going to say an extra thank you to Indy for pushing the buttons behind Kathryn's.
You learnt a new skill.
Excellent.
I know, yeah. Sorry, it was a bit chaotic. So Kathryn phoned me up at 6 and said we've got a bit of a problem. So we spent the next hour and 15 trying to sort it out, but we got there. But what it meant was obviously I had to try and do multiple things at the same time. So apologies if there was a few tricky moments at the beginning, but yeah, we got there in the end.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Right, brilliant. Well, I'll say goodbye now then, and then I'll open the breakout rooms. If anybody wants to stay behind, you're welcome to do so. So I shall hopefully see you all on the 27th.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Breakout rooms are